Today we have a 68 Pro Reverb amp. It is one of the last black panel 68s. They went to the silver panel shortly after this. And the silver panel amps in 68 also had those little vertical black lines on the front panel, but that's not important right now. But this is one of the last of the black panel amps. And as you can tell, the power transformer has been replaced. A bit more on that in a moment. Has original reverb over here, choke, and output transformer. That output transformer, it's got a bad case of the wiggles. Let me see if I can just tighten it up or whether I need to replace the mounting hardware and reinforce that with some washers. That's better, but still not great. The flanges have been deformed a little bit. And my preference on things like that is to err on the side of caution and reliability. So if I need to replace these screws, I will. But let's talk about this power transformer. This power transformer has got 750 volts secondary on the HT. So that's 325 per side. That's about 30 volts higher than the original spec, which is usually like 690 to 720. And I suspect this is going to be a little bit high on the B+. We will verify that in a little bit. It does not have a bias tap, and you'll see some more about that when we see the insides. The heaters have an 8 amp secondary. 5 amp is the secondary value for the heaters in a Pro Reverb. And when you have an amp capable of providing more current than the amp draw, we have a transformer rather, capable of providing more current than the amp actually draws, you can have too high a voltage. So we're going to be seeing what the heater voltage is in this amp. I suspect it's going to be on the high side. Then it's got a 5 amp, 5 volt tap for the tube rectifier heaters. And again, in the original one, that's going to be 3 volts. That's probably going to be less of an issue, but we'll check. And all these things together might contribute to the reported problem of this amp, that it is blowing fuses. We'll get there. So we have no bias tap. We have a very high B+. We have a transformer capable of providing way more current than necessary for both the regular tube heaters and the rectifier heater. We'll see if that is a problem, and if so, to what degree. Let's look at the Doghouse next. All right, here's the Doghouse. And if you look inside here, you can see that in the past, the old caps kind of leaked and did some nasties in here. Those old caps are long gone, but you can see the old residue from the leaking caps in here. It was not cleaned up well. And this recap job here is an example of using good parts poorly. So these resistors are just kind of tucked into the old holes. And this cap's leads are twisted around this resistor's leads, and the other cap leads are twisted around little bits of the old leads sticking out, and gobs of bad solder joints here and there. And while this is probably not the cause of the blowing fuses, this is not reliable. This is not what you want to see in a 68 Pro Reverb, which is a great amp in theory, and this will be when we're done. And they left the old bias balance resistors in there, which can drift. I'm not saying that they haven't measured them yet. Let me see what value resistors are in here. Because I don't read color bands, thanks to red-green color blindness, I just don't trust them. Not the one on the left has them, but let's see what these measure. 4.7, 1K. And that would be cool, except that those are backwards. In a Pro Reverb, this is supposed to be the 1K. This is supposed to be the 4.7K, and they've got them reversed. So total fail on this recap, in my opinion. So let's look on the inside of the amp, see what's going on. All right, down here at the power supply end, we've got the classic grounds being made to transformer mounting hardware. And I'll redo that to the pre-66, pre-CBS method of grounding directly to chassis. Got the 68 date stamps. Some of these wires that were of the new power transformer are not attached very prettily. Same for the safety ground here on this AC, on this grounded power cable, which was not installed to code. Let me peek around and see if they removed the death cap when they did that. All right, the death cap is gone, but this AC wiring here is crappy, and they're fusing the neutral and switching the hot, and they have all those wires everywhere. I'll redo that properly. Got the old screen grid resistors, which are not very reliable in these amps. I mentioned before that this transformer rather, does not have a bias tap, which is a 50 volt tap. So they took a new tap off the HT raw AC here, and they installed this terminal strip with some series resistors in series with the stock one to drop it down to some more acceptable level. I'll see where it's at. There are better ways to do this than this, and there are better resistors for the purpose. But having spoken to the owner already, I do suspect that we will be changing out this power transformer for one which has the correct voltages and currents, but we'll confirm what the heater voltages actually are in just a moment first. And I'll look at what the B plus is. And I've got with the series caps in the Doghouse on the first stage, it can handle about 700 volts on the first stage, but I'm concerned about 500 on the screen supply with a high B plus. We'll check. Let's look down the circuit, down at the other parts of the board. Okay, so some of the cathode bypass caps have been changed very poorly. Some of them are original. We've got different brands of cap in here, probably done by different techs at different times. We've got 100 nanofarad cap here across the 10 nanofarad in the tremolo, and that's going to be a really strange tremolo arrangement. The replaced roach, not very well replaced. I can neaten that up. Got some old ceramics have been changed out for film here, and some replacement here. It's a little bit large in terms of the size. The crucial ceramic here has been replaced by a film. That really needs to be ceramic in these amps to get the proper sound, and the board will need some cleaning. The pots all look original to me. And I'm looking at that, I'm not seeing nothing has been changed on the pots or input jacks or the speaker jacks, so that's good. 68, actually 69 is the last year of really good wiring in these, though in the later 68 and 69, the good wire was used in copious amounts. So on a lot of the late 60s Fenders, I have to shorten that, but this seems to be all just fine. Maybe some little nudges here and there as far as the lead dress. The plate and grid leak resistors in the phase inverter have been changed out, and I might replace those with some carbon comps just to get everything period correct without the noise. Let me plug this in and take some voltage measurements, and we'll see if the excessive current capability of this power transformer is giving us a problem. We'll check the fuse value while we're at it. All right, I did some measurements and measured what the bias is at right now, and we've got some problems. With the bias control at its existing minimum, cannot get any more negative than this. It is at negative 35 volts, and that turns into negative 31.6 at this grid and negative 32.3 at this grid. Now these grids should measure the same, pin 5 of each output tube. And the grid leaks have been changed here in the phase inverter, and I strongly doubt that there's any leakage from these coupling caps. I suspect that what I'm about to tell you next explains why these tubes are suffering and are beginning to probably have some grid leakage at one or both of them, throwing the actual grid voltage off. The B plus in the amp right now is at 457 volts DC, and the bias is already set as cool as possible. And these tubes are idling at 167.3% and 161%. So forget about 70% being on the hot side. Forget about my ideal range on these being about 53 to 55%. These are at almost 300 times, almost 200 times their rating. So 167, 161% idle dissipation. The amp is noisy, the amp is hums. These power tubes have been really subjected to a lot of abuse. No wonder it's been blowing fuses. Now, I could do a lot of changes in the bias supply and get this so that the most negative is like negative 50. If I want this range to go between like negative 50 and negative 37, as opposed to its minimum being negative 35, and then probably goes down to like negative 10 right now. But the heaters with 120 volts out of the wall are at 6.8 volts, and really you don't want to be above 6.6. 6.7 is pushing it, so 6.8 is way too much on the heaters, and the heaters for the rectifier tube are at about 5.4 volts. So we have more heater voltage on both the rectifier and on the signal tubes than we want. The bias is way too negative. I could adjust that, but the other issue is that the unloaded B plus of this amp is about 560 volts. And every time you take it out of standby, if you take it out of standby, that 560 volts briefly hits the screen, phase inverter, and preamp filter caps in this amp, which are rated for 500 volts. We've got to get that unloaded B plus down to 500 or less, hopefully less. I don't like to have more than about a 30 volt bit of headroom. I'd prefer to have more, but there are limitations with the Doghouse. So all these things point to we need to change out this power transformer, because I can fix the bias thing. I could go to great lengths to drop the heaters. Those components add a lot of heat. I could do things similarly to drop the B plus. Again, you're adding components which generate a lot of heat. That's all prone to failure. Given the intrinsic goodness and value of a 68 black panel Pro Reverb, it's worth spending the money to get the proper transformer there. Now, whether that's Hammond or Mercury, don't worry about it. I'm going to get the one that gets the best price and performance for the owner, either one of which will be better than this. And I will make that decision Monday once my reps are available over the phone. But that has to happen. And I'm going to put the rest of the stuff in the board back to as original as possible where the resistors are concerned. Ceramic, where the ceramics have been replaced by film. places like that, and places like that, because it does make a difference in the character of the sound. All the cathode bias caps, including the ones that they missed originally, are going to get changed out consistently and well, with none of this nonsense up in the air. That's just insulting to do that kind of work. And I will be redoing all the filter caps in the Doghouse, doing it properly, including all the resistors there. And unlike what we have here, we'll actually have the correct droppers as far as where the 1K goes, where the 4.7K goes. Once all that is done, I hope that these power tubes might have a happy life. They're good quality tubes. They're Tube Amp Doctor, which is a well-sorted Chinese 6L6. Usually they work really well. These have just been terribly abused in this butchered amp. So even though they are relatively new, they may not make the cut. We'll find out. There's also some considerations with this amp's cabinet that I'm going to look at in a little bit. That'll be a separate video as far as the cabinet strength and reliability, and whether it's better for me to repair the old cab, or whether it might be better from the player's perspective and the player's pocketbook for me to order a replacement Pine Pro Reverb cabinet with all the same cosmetics and an actual plywood baffle versus the MDF particle board. I was told in a comment that MDF did not exist in the late 60s, that it was all particle board. Sorry, I'm not a woodworker. I kind of use the terms interchangeably, But anyway, either way you look at it, that baffle is pretty much the same grade material as an IKEA sofa. We need to change that out if we can. The cleats in the old cab have got some damage to them. The cleats that hold the baffle in place. The baffle is not tight. A lot of added screws were put in over the years. Some of the cleats split as a result. Many of the screws in the baffle holding the speaker in place are long gone, and they have screwed the speaker from the rear into the particle board. I don't really trust that, and I have a sneaking suspicion that each Chicago Jensen C12N from 1968 in this amp, which are great speakers, are hanging on by 2 or 3 actual screws, and those are probably loose. So I'll address that potential nightmare or potential headache in another video. I'm going to get a parts list of everything this amp needs, and I'll call the owner with a caveat that some of the pricing will be sorted out Monday when my vendors are open and I can speak to a human. It's always nice to have that personal connection with vendors. Sometimes I get nice discounts as a result, which I pass along. And all this nonsense can go away and everything will be done right and done beautifully. So I think this amp is going to have a very long and happy life ahead of it. But we got to roll up our sleeves first.